Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm Zahack Tanvir, and I welcome all of you for a wonderful panel discussion on the topic of failures and fallacies of the Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan, and their offshoots. And we have great minds joining us today from United States and Saudi Arabia. We have Dr. Khaled Alshareef and from Saudi Arabia, and we have Sharon Van Ryder from United States, and we have Areej Hussain from United States, and Saad Ahmed, who is also from United States. Before we begin, I would like to give you a brief background of this panel discussion, that why we chose this topic and what is the importance and significance of this topic. The whole idea about this panel discussion is to let our audience know and learn and understand that there is a vast difference between the Islamist ideology and the Islamic faith. Unfortunately, many Muslims and non-Muslims, they have started to believe, they believe that the Islamists are the true followers of the Muslim faith. And well, I don't want to get into the details and the history and the ideology of the Islamist groups, especially the Muslim Brotherhood and Ikhwan and Muslimin, because we have esteemed guests and panelists today. They will be discussing in more details. However, I would definitely like to tell you that this is one of the biggest deceptions that people believe in. And sadly, some of the Muslims, they are carried away by the emotions, and they cannot see the reality, and they don't understand the reality. And even if you try to make them understand, they don't see this reality. They fall into believing that, these Islamist groups are fighting for some noble cause, and they are fighting for the dominance of Islam, and they are fighting to bring back those glorious days when Muslims are ruling from Spain to China. And these are some of the things they narrate, and because of this, innocent and ignorant people, they fall into their trap. And over the years, we have seen that they started all this Arab Spring, and which was actually the Blood Spring, and that led to a great chaos and mayhem in the Middle East. And in fact, we believe that Islam is a moderate religion, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he was talking to his companions, he showed some pebbles and stones and say that these pebbles and stones are of moderate length, moderate size, and so you should not be going to the extremes. And those people who went to the extremes, they were destroyed. So he taught his followers to stay away from extremism, but unfortunately this Islamist ideology teaches extremism. And this whole fiasco of Islamism and Islamist factions, it all started after 1979, the so-called Islamic Revolution of Khomeini. And then catastrophes after catastrophes came in, and we have been witnessing this, and we have been suffering. So let's move on for the panel discussion. And for the ease and better flow of this panel discussion, we have a format. Each panelist will speak for about 10 minutes. And if anyone wants to speak more than that, let me know. So you have 10 minutes each. So 4 of you will be speaking for 10 minutes, which will make up to 40 minutes. And then each panelist will get 2 minutes after 40 minutes. So you'll have about 10 minutes time to discuss among yourselves. And if you want to disagree with each other, or if you want to add some more points, then you can do that in 10 minutes. And then in the last 10 minutes, we'll have some, QA kind of discussion. And we wish that this panel discussion will be very, very beneficial, inshallah. So first, we have our esteemed and wonderful person, Dr. Khaled Alshareef. And we have been following each other on Twitter, and he's really a great guy. And we have really enjoyed talking to each other. Dr. Khaled Alshareef is from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He is PhD in business and master's in philosophy. He's an expert on Islamism, Islamist factions, and modern terrorism. And he will be speaking on debunking the myth Islamists propagate from a political and religious standpoint. Over to Khaled.
Okay. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here among great people and great minds. I've been saying for many years and speaking for many years about the Islamists, but one of the things, to be honest, at one stage, me among many young people, Muslims, we were infatuated about the ideas that these people propagate, especially when you're young. So if you look at their message from the outside, it's a very positive, great, that's built on, a social structure. So it bears a lot of benefits for those young people who join their ranks. Uh, so a lot of young people, especially in the Middle East and North Africa, Pakistan, and those countries, see the people who's joining these ranks and they're benefiting from it. And most of you would know the majority of the people who's following the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood core are really educated, mainly doctors, teachers, engineers, etc. But that's unfortunately, as we all later came to find out, that's only limited for the people who's under the main umbrella of the Muslim Brotherhood. Unfortunately, if we want to go back and speak about the history, you will find it now repeated on American canvases in the universities and campuses in the universities and schools, where you can find the far left adapting the same recruitment and I would even dare say brainwashing tactics about achieving justice for people, justice for all, and abolishing the injustice. But when they reach their goals, of course, as happened with the Iranian Revolution, they will start slaughtering everyone, starting their allies and the cannon fodder they used to achieve their goals. Not so far along, a few minutes back, I was in a discussion with Sharon. We were discussing the similarities about the Bolshevik Revolution and how they adapted a model where they, became closer to the liberals in the former Soviet states under the Russian Tsar's rule. So they courted the support of the liberals, the workers, the people who were marginalized by the Tsar and his regime. Similar to that, the Khomeini revolution, they courted the educated Iranians, the liberal Iranians, and the educated ones. In both cases, as soon as they achieved their goal, on those same steps of liberty, they killed the liberty itself and all their partners in crime. Same thing happened in the Egyptian revolution, but thank God, Egypt was saved thanks to the efforts of President Sisi and the late King Abdullah, God rest his soul. But if you want to take the history in perspective, it's not just about the political arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Muslim Brotherhood is a big umbrella for a lot of Muslim extremist movements. I would dare say terrorist movements like Takfir and al-Hijra, which basically its name translates into infidelity and making the hijrah. Those people, literally, if you are not on the same page with them, you're an infidel and you have to be killed. And a lot of their crimes happened in Egypt. But the success of the Muslim Brotherhood did not start at Egypt itself, because Hassan al-Banna, although he was a smart man, he could not achieve the success into taking the Muslim Brotherhood from a country level movement into a global phenomena. The man behind that success is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. The man was an Ottoman employee at the beginning of his life, like his father and his grandfather, and furthermore, they were always the Grand Muftis of Jerusalem. All of them who were from a Sufi, a very extreme and violent Sufi background, then adapted to Sunni. Of course, we know it's just a ploy to a Sunni religion, same like Bashar al-Assad did in Syria. We know it's just a joke. So these people were always Ottoman employees. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Islamists are very fast to adapt. So they've changed their skin and they've started serving the British Crown under the occupation of Palestine and Egypt and Syria. Al-Husseini was in the same time playing the nationalist card with Arab socialists. Most of them were military, and they gave us the awful and horrific Pan-Arabism and Ba'athist movement, which is the Nazi version of the Arabic version of Nazism. So his teachings tried to overthrow the rule of the Hashemites in Iraq, was unsuccessful, and it was managed by what they call the Four Golden Generals, something that we hopefully can discuss further in the future, but our focus now is in the Muslim Brotherhood. So his effort to help the Pan-Arabism failed, ended up eventually turning their alliance into a full-out war that happened mainly in the 60s and the 50s when Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power. In the beginning of his rule, he befriended the Muslim Brotherhood and eventually turned on them and executing their bloody scholar Sayyid Qutb. At the same time, Syria led a very aggressive campaign against them, and their grand scholar, who ended up developing the school of Sururism, of political Islam, stayed in Saudi Arabia for some time before eventually fleeing to Qatar, and that's where he died. So it came to full circle with al-Qaradawi taking over from the founder of Sururism, and now we have the new face of Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East. That's totally different from the one in Europe. The one in Europe came after Gamal Abdel Nasser totally annihilated them, and they escaped into Europe and the United States, but mainly they found big refuge in Germany and in the UK. And if you would look into those regiments or structures of the Muslim Brotherhood, you will find a pure Egyptian one in Germany that's mainly led by a lot of Egyptians and founded by a lot of Egyptians, then adapted into a more broader approach that included the Somalis, Tunisians, North Africans in general. And that arm is very loyal to the idea of bringing back the Ottoman Empire. Meanwhile, if you look at the part that's in the UK, you will find it adapted more of a Maududi model, which is more in a broader Islamist model and just conquer by any means necessary. While the arm in the United States is practically an arm of Hamas that grew to become larger than Hamas, which, as we all know, is CARE. CARE is controlling the whole aspects, and it has a lot of political influence. And I think Sharon would know more about that than myself, because our brethren also in the United States can feel the influence they have. Those three models that adapted a move to the West and also moved to the GCC both followed a certain model. I would call it a method of operation, where they go and they infiltrate three main sectors: charities, schools, education in general, and the hospitals or medical sector. So those people, you will find them in those three sectors with a very big presence. Charities allows them to manufacture that social structure, meaning the governments of the West entrust them with billions of dollars, euros, or whatever is the currency. Those people use those funds to enable them to recruit, to change minds, and to influence the Muslim minorities in these countries. Because end of the day, who controls the money controls those small societies. If you say education, of course, because young people are, easier to influence since earlier age. If you start feeding the history, the false history, of course, the false narrative, and the whole victim card, to feed into them a sense of hate, or I would not use hate, I would say disdain towards the Western civilization, that's giving them a home. And the same thing you can find also, unfortunately, with a lot of Muslim people. They have the same problem with the GCC countries.
Yes.
That gave home to tens of millions of these people for more than 76 years. So if you think about it, they are taking the control of the charity, controlling the money, controlling the small economies, mainly becoming the employers and the ones who's controlling the whole small societies. They control the education, they start feeding the ideas, and they control the medical sector, and they start feeding into it. And from there, they become and they adapt this image of, angels. Unfortunately, they're far from it. In a more recent development, starting in the late 80s, you would find them more shifting into also the media, especially ones coming from Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. That's mainly in the Arab world. Same thing with these people, plus our Pakistani brothers or peoples from the subcontinent or from North African or African countries. They've realized after the success of the model that's adapted by Qatar and others, they've realized how much important it is to start controlling the media. And from there also they started to shift an infiltration of the media itself. This is how they operate. Additionally, if you look at the Western model, it have few differences, because if the GCC, it's all monarchies. It's harder for them to infiltrate the government in a direct way. So they will adapt those ways from education, charities, etc. But in the West, there's elections, and they can be, senators or parliamentary representatives, and you will always find them in those parts of the government. But you will not find them in the executive part yet, because if you're in the legislative part, and our American friends can correct me, you would receive less of the lashback that you would usually find if you're in the executive branch. Mm-hmm. So they adapted that, and they infiltrated successfully into countries like Sweden, Germany, and other countries. But you can find the main success stories that they achieved in Europe, in those countries. And of course, let's not forget our beloved Ilhan Omar, who's also part of the story. So that's how they adapted to it. The Iranian case, and I hope I'm not taking too much time from everyone.
Yeah, so you can, wind up, because we'll move on to another panelist, inshallah.
Okay, I'll wrap it up in 1 minute. The Iranian model was the successful one, and that's the end product. That's what I just wanted to say. So if we allow them to have their way, we will end up having Iran on your doorsteps in the US and in Europe and in the Middle East. And that's something we cannot allow.
Thank you so much, Khaled. And I wish that we keep listening to you. It was really interesting, and it was really informative. And I wish that we could have another discussion where you can, give us more information about this. And this was Dr. Khaled Alshareef from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, who was speaking on debunking the political and the debunking the myth of the Muslim Brotherhood and how they have infiltrated into different governments. Now we will move on to another panelist, and she is Sharon Van Ryder. She is from the United States. She is geopolitical analyst, MENA political expert and commentator, and she will be speaking on the dangerous political ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood and their failures to the people over the years. Over to Sharon.
Hey everyone. So I want to say hello to everyone and thank you very much. Nice to meet additionally other people. So on the American side, I think you can definitely see the infiltration that we have had on our side, and the reason why I've gotten into this, I want to say about five years ago, because I saw the penetration that has been going on here with the Muslim Brotherhood and the impact that has had within our own Congress, and understanding the significant difference between you have Islam, the religion, versus Islamist. And as a non-Muslim, as you can tell, the majority of us, we have no clue what the difference is. The majority of, especially people, and I know a lot of you have seen it, so you got the people on the right who just blame every Muslim for every problem. And then you have the people on the left who are just complete, total political correctness and don't want to say anything at all, right? So there's the two. So then I had to be like, okay, what is going on between the two? What is the difference? So you have Islam, the faith, and then you have Islam, which actually is a political movement. So what does that mean? Which took me a long time to figure out. It is technically the manipulation of religion for political reasons. So when you look back, even in Western history, when you go back in Europe to America, the reason why we had to have a significant separation between religion and our government is because our pure strength and power that religion has upon its people, right? We go to holy wars over our religion, right? Like how many wars have we gone into? Christian crusades, Catholics going over and destroying this and that over quote unquote God. That is because our clerks, our priests, and everything had significant power over its people. Now, eventually over time, the government finally said, listen, we can't allow the religion to have such power over people. So they eventually separated out the two because of the political movement within the two. So when you look at our history, that's one reason why we end up having to have such a significant separation between the two. And, our founding fathers who saw all of that over there in Britain came to America. That's why it's separated and why it's in our Constitution. Now you have the Muslim Brotherhood that's now involved within our government. And it is such a diverse organization, which doesn't really it has one main person involved. However, due to their political influence within the Democratic Party, it's really hard. And I know a lot of people keep asking me, why can we not name them as a terrorist organization? And a lot of it is because they're not really doing anything besides speaking, right? And what they're speaking is not considered to be anything that is a terrorist act. So all we can do really is have our people watch what they're doing and see what's going on from there. And we track money, right? We have money laundering laws that track where they're going. And that's when we end up finding that they're sending money over to Hamas, or they're sending money to this. So you were talking about the charity organizations, right? So the Muslim Brotherhood goes into different, communities, right? They start to create these extracurricular activities as charity organizations. They create schools. they go to these poor areas within America, these people who just came over to the United States, and you already feel like you're not part of the community in the first place because you're new to the place. One, you may not speak the English, you may not speak the language. You already feel like you're not part of it because one, we're predominantly all Christian, we're not Muslim. So now you have this organization coming in that's part of this Muslim Brotherhood that makes you feel like you are part of something. So they create these extracurricular activities and they start to bring in the youth. And what happens is that what most parents see is that they see these well-off and well-educated, these are doctors and lawyers and this and that that are higher power. They have political power. So these parents want their kids to succeed as these people have within America. So it's very easy for their parents to see them as being mentors. So as any parent would, they want to have their kids then go to them and say, okay, this is a great mentor, not realizing what's happening is that they're being brainwashed and how these religious teachings are really going through and manipulating what they're doing. So it's taken a long time to figure out all of this, not just us Americans and, all the different organizations and that kind of stuff. So you have like two very different, vastly different understandings as to the religion versus, the political part of it, and understanding how they're infiltrating and doing different aspects within our political system. So you have a prime example is, you can look at Omar, right? Like you have, and everyone sees it on Twitter, right? How if we go in and we tell them what they're doing and how her saying, our system is rotten to the core, right? How bad that is, or burn it all down, right? Which all of us experienced and heard. What does that do to the people that follow them? This is my question to the broader audience. When you have a leader, right, say this. When you have people telling you that your government and your leadership and all that are rotten and it has to be burned down, what is this doing to the actual institution of the United States of America? But it's doing nothing but causing more chaos and more instability. So, we have every single right to question what is going on within her and what is the information coming from. So this is what we're having a problem with. And a lot of other people are starting to question it. So the question is it the ideology of, and we know it's not about Islam, the religion, but it's the political Islam that she's coming from. And that is the difference. And that's what people need to start to understand, that there's a significant difference between her being, I am a Muslim woman, and her ideology of being political Islam and utilizing it to then try to silence all of us who are starting to question her motives behind what she's doing. So that's where a lot of us are starting to have problems with everything that's going on here in America, besides seeing what happened over in the Middle East. Because once you start doing the comparison between what's happening now here and what previously happened over in Egypt, and you can see it with the revolutions and the young groups that went out and protested and then went in and went through, like you can start seeing the similarities between what is going on here, what happened in the past. So the question is, like, who is influencing what and where did it come from and who's driving it? So that's where we're all, I guess all of us can kind of see when you get all the different parties together and start really analyzing the situations between what's going on in Europe, what's going on in America, to what happened in the Middle East. So.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was really wonderful information, and we've been listening to you. And I wish that you keep speaking, but we need to move on to the next speaker, Dr. Areej Hussain. Dr. Areej Hussain is from United States, and she is specialized in Arabic studies from the American University of Cairo, and she is a political analyst and a commentator. She will speak about the role of MB, Muslim Brotherhood, behind the destruction of the Arab world. Over to Dr. Areej Hussain.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Hello to everyone and assalamu alaikum to my Muslim friends. I first of all chose this topic because I observed the Syrian war and all these Arab Springs that happened all around the Middle East, and it affected me heavily. And I also wanted to answer a lot of questions throughout these years. People have been asking me that why Muslim Brotherhood has been treated so bad, why these dictators are in power, and overall social media talk about this issue. So I wanted to explain to them that what they really see in the mainstream media is not the reality. The reality is far much different from what they have been taught throughout these years. I'm going to start with the Iraq, because Iraqi war was the first war that happened in the beginning. And I'm going to quote a very famous, prominent scholar of Iraq. His name is Taha Dalemi, and how he interacted with, as a young person in his 80s, how he interacted with them and how he got to realize that they were not sincere with their cause, and they really didn't want Sharia law, and they really didn't want the best of the Muslims. So he said, when he was really young and the Iraqi and Irani war was going on, he said that Muslim Brotherhood members would come to me and tell me that Saddam Hussein was a devil, and he's gonna get killed in this war, and Iran is gonna get control of the of Iraq. And they used to brainwash me a lot. But then when really Saddam survived, I asked them, you told me that Saddam is gonna die. What really happened? And they were dumbfounded. Later on, when US troops came to Iraq, and they started having this war, and Saddam was really killed in the end, and Iranians took control, and all these militias and terrorist organizations took control of the country, then he really realized that what he has been brainwashed about was totally wrong, and Saddam was a hero. I am going to move on to one of the prominent parliament member of Iraq, Qutayb al-Jubaydi. He said, do you guys know that Muslim Brotherhood is financed by Iran, and they are getting their daily wages from that country? And let them come out and deny it if I'm really saying it wrong. Later on, it was revealed through the New York Times that in an article was exposed, it was exposing the Ikhwani deputy, Salim al-Jaburi, the president of the parliament back then, that he had a top political advisor as an agent working for him from Iran. And he denied it totally, and he said, and later on he said that I don't have any problem having close ties with Iran, and I don't regret a bit. Same thing with other parliament members and top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, that they believe that there is nothing wrong having any ties with Iran, while they know very well what Iran did to their country. What really does it tell you? That they just want power. They really don't care about people as they claim. They really didn't care about getting them better jobs and getting rid of a dictator. Their agenda was to get in power. What the funny thing is that one of the top leaders of Shia organization, Hizb al-Dawah, Talib al-Rifai, in his interview, and by the way, all these, whatever I'm quoting here, you'll find it on YouTube videos. and you can use it as an evidence. The Taliban Rifai said that I started to know Brotherhood since I was 22 and was asked by them to become the founder. I mean, they're saying they wanted a Shia person to become a founder of a Brotherhood organization. So really, people who always ask me that why they are treated the way they are treated in some of the countries, still they're very powerful in Iraq and Kuwait and certain other countries. My answer is that they are not truthful in their cause. They are not loyal to us. They're not loyal to the Muslims and the Ummah. Another funny thing that I found doing my research, that another very famous Iraqi politician, a Shia clergyman, said that, his name is Ammar al-Hakim. He said that Brotherhood wasn't recognized by Sunni ulamas, and this is really, really something questionable, that why weren't they recognized back then? Because educated people, scholars, people who have deeper thinking, understanding of the religion, true Islamic religion, not what they portray, and people who have wisdom and dealt with these fundamental organizations, this terrorist organization, they know that they are not sincere. They are not loyal to their countries. Their loyalty is to some other third party, and they're all working together for, not for people, but for themselves, for their own agendas. So he said that Brotherhood, since they were not recognized by the ulama of Iraq, they used to come to us and get our blessings. His father, exactly, he mentioned Imam al-Hakim, his father, they got his blessing to move on to, to make this, to create this party called Al-Hizb al-Islami fil Iraq, which is the Iraqi Islamic Party. What happened after that? After all this chaos happened in Iraq, people were slaughtered, they were killed, they were displaced. Sunni majority cities, they were totally destroyed, and people were forced to leave those areas and go live somewhere else, most likely in tents at the outskirts of the cities. Sunni majority and Sunni places were targeted because they want to change they wanted Sunnis to be lesser than Shias. So they wanted this change to happen according to their plan. And what were the Muslim Brotherhood members doing? They were enjoying their wealth. They were enjoying being in politics. They were enjoying being in power and becoming friends with Iran. They didn't have any problem that Iran attacked their country. They were never loyal. They were never loyal. This is what the Ummah has to understand. The people have to understand that these people don't want your interest. They don't want your well-being. Same thing with, if you see, I'm gonna just go quickly about some of these countries. You don't need to get into details. What happened in Tunis? Whatever happened here, there you have the Nahda party, which is the party of, and mind you, just notice that all these countries with different names, they never claim that we are Brotherhood. Why? Because a commoner won't find out that they are the same party. There's a network all around the world. There's an international, this is an international terrorist organization with different names. So here they are called Harkat al-Nahda, which is Nahda party. And what they did, that they helped, they encouraged people to topple the government of bin Ali. And after that, what happened? They came forcefully. By the way, if you really read the history, they were forcefully in power, and they didn't ask for the election until 2014. And what happened in 2014? The people elected the Liberal Party. What really I found really disturbing, that we all know Hezbollah. Everybody in the Muslim world and non-Muslim world know this is a terrorist organization. The top leader of Al-Ikhwan, the Brotherhood, his name is Mehdi Akif. What he said, and I found, and also you find his clip on the YouTube, I found it very disturbing when he said that, do you know really that when Nasrullah became famous when he started, and he said as if they fought Israel, which is, we all know the theory behind it. That who was the first organization that helped them? We, the Muslim Brotherhood. We sent 10,000 fighters to help them, to help Hassan Nasrallah, to help this Lebanese organization, terrorist organization, Hezbollah. And we are so proud. We are so proud that we still are with them. So this would tell you, because a lot of, people can understand what happened in Iraq and Syria and other countries. But when it comes to Egypt, it's just like they get really emotional, because what they saw on the television and whatever they saw on Al Jazeera, or another thing, you should notice that whatever Al Jazeera is showing and whatever Ikhwani media is showing, everybody is copying it. Whether you are in Europe, whether you are in America, whether you're CNN, whether you're BBC, whether you're in Pakistan, they're just copying those misconceptions. So when they really look at Ikhwan, they really feel like, oh my God, we feel so sorry for you that Sisi killed you guys and crushed Ikhwanis there and killed, and they literally say that Morsi was killed in the jail. And all this is, we really don't know. I mean, was he really killed? Who has the evidence? Nobody. So you can't really say that. And same thing happened in the mosque, the holy mosque, and they didn't even care about the sanctity of the masjid, the mosque. And they really they had a lot of people think that it's the Egyptian military who was killing the protesters, but that's not true. Ikhwanis had it all planned. They had weapons, and by the way, this information is also, you would say that, oh, your information is by Miss Sisi's media, or the, whoever you're supporting, the what do you call it, the Wahhabis and all that. But really, if you hardly find this information on Egyptian media. Through my research, I found commoners, people who lived that incident, people who were there posting videos showing how Ikhwanis had weapons, and they were fighting at protesters, and they were killing Egyptian army, and they were causing all this bloodshed. Yet to throw a bombshell at why Ikhwanis were treated this way. If you haven't researched, you will find out that one of the most important and major reason was because the security of Egypt was in jeopardy. In July 2013, the US Congress revealed a document signed by Mohammed Morsi in the presence of the Mohammed Badia, which is the Supreme Deputy of Brotherhood, and their financer is Khairat al-Shatir. They were all there with Carter signing a treaty to give away Sinai to Israel. And what will Morsi get in return? $8 billion. So don't you think that if you belong to, for instance, India or Pakistan or any of these countries, and your government is a traitor and they're selling your land, which they don't own, to an enemy, wouldn't your military interrupt and take over? This information, you can find the real documents everywhere on the internet. You just have to research. You'll find the real documents that talk about that. And there's a video also that is showing Carter and Morsi signing up the deal. So really...
sorry to interrupt. Can you, is it possible for you to wind up within 3-4 minutes?
Yes. So this is exactly what happened. And moving on to Syria. Okay, this is what I was talking about, signing up the treaty. And what really happens, because in this deal, what would really happen, that Hamas will get Sinai, okay, if this were to happen. And in return, Israel will take over all the free Palestinian lands. And they accuse Saudi Arabia and UAE that they are, dealing with Israel. They want to give away Palestine, but look who was the person who was doing this thing. Moving on to Syria, and this will be my last, inshallah, last one. So give me a few minutes. What really happened in Syria was really devastating. And Ikhwani, the Brotherhood, really knew what was going to happen in Syria because they tried it before. In 1982, in Hama, the massacre happened. It was done by the father of Bashar al-Assad, Hafiz al-Assad, and Ikhwanis, back then also, Brotherhood back then also tried to crush the revolution against the government. And they really used bulldozers and all kind of heavy weapons to kill 20,000 people at that time. And if you really listen to, and this is why we really have to go back to the real scholars and we really have to listen to them. You listen to Albani, he talked about it. He said that I advise the Fanis not to do that. This is not the way to get your Khilafah back. This is not the way to imply Sharia. And we all know this is not their true intention, but just for the sake of talk, he advised them not to do that. And they didn't listen. And what really happened is that, again, in 2011, they protested against Bashar al-Assad. And as a result, a lot of military, not military, a lot of organizations emerged. Yeah, militants emerged. And they started fighting each other. But my question is to the people who really think that these fighters were doing the right thing, is that who was financing them? Who was, I mean, you're not born with all these weaponry and heavy machines, and it takes billions and billions of dollars. So the people, the countries who supported them, they couldn't help them get their freedom. The people really need to understand that these countries who gave them weapons, they wanted their own agendas in Syria. For instance, Turkey. What did Turkey do to them? After Turkey used them to kill a lot of people and to fight each other and cause all this, they actually trained them to go fight in Libya. Yeah. So Turkey used them for that. And what were Ikhwanis doing at that time? They were attending the conferences in Sushi, Asatana. They were in nice hotels. Their kids were going to nice schools. They were having really nice time. And this deal, oh, sorry, we didn't come up with an agreement. Oh, sorry, we couldn't help. But all along, they were just taking money for both sides. I mean, if you really get into this and you really research that, they even were getting money from Assad himself. And many fighters who were fighting in Syria changed their demeanor and they went fought with Assad. So Brotherhood is a mess. It's a dangerous organization. We shouldn't believe in what they say. They are gonna drive you through hell to reach their goals. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting, and we can understand that you put a lot of efforts to make this presentation, and that really helped us a lot to understand that Brotherhood is indeed a mess. It's indeed a mess, and you made a very interesting point that these people that take money from both the sides and they enjoy a good, accommodation, and their children go to good schools. And in fact, I remember a dialogue from a web series that the Hamas or these organizations, they send the fighters and they enjoy jacuzzi in Qatar, or they enjoy almond milk in Qatar. So this is their reality. And people need to understand that this is one of the biggest deceptions they're witnessing. Thank you so much, Dr. Areej Hussain. And next, and the last panelist, we have Saad Ahmed from the United States. And in fact, I should thank him that this whole panel discussion was his idea, and he messaged me, I think 2 weeks ago, that we'll have this discussion to educate people, to create awareness, and that was his original idea. And thanks to Khaled and Sharon that they accepted my invitation, and they took time to be a part of this. So Saad Ahmed, he's a graduate student from Georgetown University, and he's a Muslim campaigner against extremist groups. And he will be speaking about the double standards of Muslim Brotherhood in the West, the religious and spiritual void this ideology has created in the people. Over to Saad. Yes, Saad, please continue.
Yeah, okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I want to thank Brother Zahack and the rest of the panelists for joining us today and having this great conversation. You know, it's been very beneficial so far, and I just took a couple notes while the other panelists were speaking, and I wanted to piggyback off of a couple of their points. You know, first, I want to thank Dr. Khaled for really breaking things down and, you know, really exposing them in their religious fallacies that they have. And, you know, he talked about how they came from different ideological backgrounds, including Sufism. And then I also want to talk to a point that Sharon made about Ilhan Omar. So I would say, you know, over the last year or so, Ilhan Omar has really been, she's really been rejected in the Muslim community in America in terms of those that are, you know, religiously involved in mosques and stuff like that. You know, people have really seen that she's after her own agenda and her power, and it's not really about Islam for her, because they've seen her, you know, she's exposed herself through things that she's supported and events that she's attended and stuff. And lastly, with Dr. Areej Hussain, you know, she talked about how the Muslim Brotherhood has, you know, historically been very close to the Iranian regime. And this is something that's very well known. If their claim that they were after Islam was true, why would they be exporting their ideology to countries that actually have more Islamic laws than Egypt itself did? Like, for example, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. They don't like that, actually. If you actually look at them in detail, they're not interested in that. They're interested in having power and controlling things like that. And you'll also see that their followers, they, you know, they parade them and they champion up these scholars or so-called scholars from the Muslim Brotherhood, but they look down upon the scholars from, you know, for example, the GCC countries, who are actually, you know, spiritually, they have much more to offer. They have, you know, their adherence to the text of both the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They're actually stronger in that. And you'll find that the Muslim Brotherhood supporters, they're not interested in those scholars. And, you know, as I get into my points here, talking about how the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, without explicitly naming themselves, they have, you know, they have some infiltration into the minds of youth. You know, as Dr. Khaled mentioned, in universities, they get involved in social work and, you know, perhaps in MSAs and stuff. And what they do is, you know, a lot of Muslim college students in America, they're not from religious backgrounds. They're not, families are not, you know, usually that religious. You know, there might be moderately religious, you know, attending, you know, Eid prayers or Friday prayers once in a while. But when they get to the universities, they flood their mind with these, you know, social work ideas and charitable work. Oh, we have to stand up for justice and stuff like that, and align yourself with the far left, because obviously the far left, you know, they're always looking to, you know, let people in. And what they do is they create this Muslim identity of people that's actually a false identity, because it's not necessarily a Muslim one. It's a far left, you know, social work. We got to stand up for justice. But then when you look at the crux of it, if you go down to it, there's actually very little to no Islamic identity in it. And you'll find that these people, they actually eventually get burned out. I mean, they, you know, what do you do once you graduate college? You can't be in the college campus forever. You got to graduate college and, you know, move on in your life. And you'll find that these guys, they actually, you know, Islam becomes void in their life, sadly. And then another point that, you know, we don't specifically have people standing on the minbar, you know, chanting Muslim Brotherhood, but you have some of those ideas that, because first of all, we do have a huge population of Egyptians within the Muslim community here. And some of them, unfortunately, brought over that ideology when they came here, that, you know, you got to be anti-government, anti-anything. So anybody who happens to be, you know, a peace-loving person who just wants to get along with the government, or they're from a Muslim country and they like the government. The people with that Muslim Brotherhood ideology, they will actually hate that person, and they will, you know, demonize him and criticize him. And if you ever, you know, happen to say anything against them, you know, like Khaled said, sometimes they'll excommunicate you. Sometimes they'll just say, oh, you're not a good Muslim because you support this and you support that. But really, you know, digging into this issue, you know, one of the great things that I have come across is that, you know, when I got into, you know, studying about Islam and stuff, I knew right away, you know, I was a young kid, but I was never, you know, I was never impressed by their ideology, because, you know, I looked at what the actual scholars, you know, as Dr. Areej had said, you know, she named some great scholars like Sheikh Albani and others. They have actually been refuting and, you know, making these ideologies clear for many, many years, even before the Muslim Brotherhood became popular in any kind of political landscape in Middle Eastern countries or in the United States. So they, you know, they've really been working hard, but you'll find that in the average person who's pretty innocent, they can, you know, they can be brainwashed pretty quickly by these ideologies. And, you know, I'll give you some good examples here. Maybe, you know, maybe about 10 years ago, you know, this is actually a very nominal example, but about 10 years ago, we had the day of Eid, you know, coincide with the day of Friday. Okay, so, and I was working, you know, I was, you know, I from time to time, I would lead prayers in a mosque and stuff. So we had to, you know, make some arrangements for whether or not we're going to have the Friday prayer, you know, after the Eid prayer on that day. So I was looking through some discussions of scholars, and I came across a well-respected scholar that, you know, many people who are in the, you know, circles of studying Islam, they would respect him, as Dr. Salih al-Fawzan from Saudi Arabia. So I brought this opinion up that he said that, you know, the solution to our problem was that, you know, you can have Friday prayer, but it's not mandatory. And when I presented this to someone, he kind of pulled me aside and said, "Oh, excuse me, brother. Yeah, I know you're just following a fiqh opinion here, but, you know, be wary of Dr. Salih al-Fawzan because, you know, X, Y, and Z." And his reasoning was because Dr. Salih al-Fawzan has been a staunch critic of the Muslim Brotherhood. So he's telling me not to follow him in a fiqh opinion because of his opinion on the Muslim Brotherhood. So I was really taken aback by that. I was like, wow, this guy's going to tell me not to follow someone who's a well-respected scholar, you know, who's someone who speaks in the Grand Mosque in Mecca, and I should follow this guy here who's living in America and you know, just living his life like as he wants. And then, you know, this is the type of ridiculousness that you find in these people. And another example I'll give you here is that a quite prominent imam here in America, you know, like I said, these people don't specifically call themselves the Muslim Brotherhood or anything, but we can definitely see that they have their clothes. He posted a picture of Dr. Saleh al-Sheikh, who was the Minister of Islamic Affairs in Saudi Arabia. And at this time, the Sheikh, he happened to be, you know, he was in the palace, and there was a foreign delegation coming in from America to Saudi Arabia, and he happened to be sitting on a chair, he's like you would expect, and somebody came and sat next to him from the American delegation who happened to be somebody in the Trump administration who you know, he's no longer in the Trump administration, but he had, you know, in the past written some things about Islam and Muslims and stuff, and he had posted this picture and made it seem like, you know, this was so dishonest. When I looked at this, he made it seem as if this sheikh was giving an acceptance and green light of what that person had wrote or what he had written over the years about Islam, even though there's so much dishonesty here. Because number one, does this sheikh even speak English? Number two, does this sheikh even know who he's sitting next to, or is he just sitting in a chair? Like, if you're inviting someone in a room, you sit in a chair with them. That doesn't mean that you accept everything that they've done in their life. And you know, this was so dishonest. And the funny thing is, though, many years later, this same imam who posted the stuff, he he has been photographed by numerous people within American Muslim community, you know, doing things that are very questionable to us as Muslims. And he's been brought to, you know, it's been brought in the spotlight over that. But in all of this, they've always maintained one thing, that, okay, we're going to just keep working and burning ourselves out in these social issues. But there's actually, at the end of the day, what do you end up with? Do you become a more spiritually rich Muslim, or, you know, person like that? Do you become a better person through all these ideologies? The answer is no. You're left with nothing at the end of the day. And you'll see in their followers, their followers come and go. They get burned out. They're not, you know, when you get into your 40s and 50s, you lose interest in these things, and people are more worried about taking care of their kids and making sure their kids are not, you know, doing bad things and stuff like that. Their kids' education, they get burned out. So then, what do these people who need these social media presences do? They target youth, because they know youth are impressionable. And you know, these are the kinds of things that I've seen in the American Muslim scene, and it's pretty disappointing. But I would say that, you know, in a lot of mosques, their ideology is becoming, you know, very rejected. You know, people are no longer interested in this, because it's just you know, it's so spiritually empty, and, you know, there's not much they can do. They can't help the youth from, you know, we have issues with youth doing drugs, you know, questioning, you know, their life, and, you know, having, you know, bad relationships with their parents and stuff. And what can this ideology do for you? I mean, you can only protest and chant so long. You have to actually live your life. So yeah, and then, you know, they just have these double standards. So for example, in the past few months, the things that have gone on in the Middle East, if anything happened from UAE or in anything in the GCC countries, they'll be the first to post it on social media, and without even verifying if it's true or not, or the details. But then if something happens in other countries, they're just totally quiet about it. And these things, these double standards have just, you know, really frustrated people over the years. And you know, I hope in the future that this ideology will just totally, you know, go away, because it's really not produced anything in our community here in America.
Thank you so much, Saad. That was really good listening to you. You know, you were giving your experiences, how you dealt with these people, and it was good to learn that youth are no more interested in Muslim Brotherhood ideology. But I feel that we need to work a lot to educate the youth. Now we'll move on to open discussion between the panelists. We'll have 10 minutes. And Khaled and Sharon, if you want to share something and if you want to add some point, please go ahead. Okay, let me ask something to Sharon. Sharon, do you really appreciate what Saudi Arabia is doing to fight extremism and you know, changing the notion of what it was before?
I definitely see the significant difference between what Saudi Arabia was about to where it is now. And I know that our history was to always fight extremists within each other, but now it seems to be more about finding within itself. And, you know, and it's not just the extremist as to the violent extremist, right? So you have the two kind. You have the ones who are violent, who are the ones who are actually, I guess you can say, doing the problems. And then you have the ones who do the preaching, the ones who do a lot of the brainwashing, right, is the best way to describe it. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people, especially on our side, have a problem with, right? We consider them to be activists, and it's now human rights issues, because they come off as being, you know, so for some reason they're being put in jail because of what they're saying. They're supposed to be these moderates, where in the past, when most of us don't speak Arabic, which seems to be a bit of an issue. But once you finally realize what they're saying and how they're saying it, and it is really how it ends up coming across to a young, impressionable person. So it's no different than a very well-educated college teacher, right? Who then preaches, these same thing, socialist agendas. Like we have Marxist issues going on here currently in America, right? Who then ends up changing our youth over time. It's no different than what these clerks did that's going on over in Saudi Arabia. And until you start to realize it is because of what they're doing and where they're speaking. So you have these very young, impressionable from 13 to 25, let's face it, none of us, our brains are very developed and we're very impressionable. All of us were at that time. So if you're going to listen to someone and you start to listen to what they're saying and this kind of stuff, it ends up changing how you think about, this narrative that the West is trying to attack Islam, that we are these horrible Americans and we are out to attack you. And if that is constantly all you hear, right, and they're constantly trying to segregate you from rest of society, you end up having this issue, right? So now you have Saudi Arabia going, all right, we're going to need to stop this. Obviously, if you're going to stop something, you need to stop the preaching. Well, that's pretty much what Saudi Arabia did. Now, the narrative is, oh my God, it's a human rights issue. These guys are activists because very bad, you are a monarchy and these are dictators and da-da-da-da-da. Well, it's not really it, because once you realize what these people were saying, when, I don't know about you, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not a bad American. I have nothing against any Muslim whatsoever. So like this is the narrative that they constantly put out. And as you see, we have all fought it. And we're constantly going against it. And it's the problem is that these human rights activists and lawyers that are fighting, saying it's freedom of speech or whatever it is. And I am all for freedom of speech. I think a lot of you have seen me, fight for it. But at the same time, though, you have to look at what they're saying. It's no different than our preachers here. They all have to be licensed, right? They all have to be well-educated in particular colleges. They all have to be monitored to what they're saying to their congregation, because you end up with cults and then they drink the Kool-Aid and they die. So you can't have that. And it's no different than what's going on in your country now. You can't have these particular people brainwash a bunch of youth to run off and join ISIS. And then you complain that you have a bunch of ISIS fighters. So it's no different than what's going on there. So I look at it as Saudi Arabia is now trying to get rid of the cult leaders. And that's pretty much what's going on. So I'm very happy with it. And I hope other countries start doing the same thing, that they see that the issue is what's going on there and start emulating the same problem. So that's what got me interested in it. And for me to understand it as a non-Muslim, to understand what the underlying problem was, which takes a lot of digging. I'll tell you that, guys, now. So that's pretty much my story on all of you guys. I think, I think you've all seen me probably evolve well over the years of trying to figure everything out. It's taken a lot of time. And so I do enjoy it, though.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Actually, to just piggyback off your comment there, I think Saudi Arabia has actually been doing it for a long time, but I just think they've gotten more, it's come more to light in the last few years. But even during previous kings and stuff, there was always especially amongst the clerics, the senior scholars and stuff, they have been trying to eradicate this ideology for many, many years. And you can go back to scholars such as Muhammad Amin al-Jami, who maybe died many years ago, but he was very famous for trying to eradicate this ideology many, many years ago. And also, there's other famous scholars, Sheikh bin Baz and Ibn Uthaymeen. They've actually been talking about this for many years, but I guess, it didn't come out to the Western media until recently. But yeah, maybe the methods and they've become more sophisticated in eradicating this ideology in the last few years. But yeah, I think, you know, they don't get credit as much for this. But, you know, like I would say, you know, for example, there was one scholar, like as Khaled said, you know, they come from the Sufi order, which is not necessarily what you find in Saudi Arabia. But one Sufi scholar, he actually said that if I have to be just and I have to be fair, I would say that the first person to talk about extremism in our time was actually the late Sheikh bin Baz. And he said it's very sad that people try to, you know, ignore that fact. So, yeah.
Yeah, Khaled. Yeah. Continue.
I want to just push one point. A few weeks back, Sharon and myself, we were discussing the Sufi and Shiite, I would call them power hubs. And those are the worshipping of the dead. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, Sharon. One of the issues, and let me be clear, not one, it is the issue they have with Saudis and our grassroots Islam is because we don't have the middleman.
Yes.
In Muhammad Sheikh bin Abdul Wahhab, which they called Wahhabi, which is, of course, the name of the Abadist Shiite sect that was in North Africa, but we were labeled with the unfortunate name because of the late Sheikh name. Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab was living under a struggling Arabian Peninsula that was fighting with Ottomans for hundreds of years. The issue the late Sheikh had, plus the people of Arabia, is those shrines, I think shrines is the correct word, of those graves. Those graves or those shrines used to take money from the very poor people, their food, their livelihood, and they were supposed to pray to those dead bones to seek rain or fortune or whatever. Those all coming from the influences of Sufism that's influenced by shamanist Tigrism, which is the original faith of the new hero, Ertugrul. So if you think about it, it's all about the money. I'm not going to delve into more about it. It's about the money and the power. So the man, Sheikh Abdul Wahhab, eliminated the middleman and brought people back to the roots of the faith, which is, if you have anything, you can go to the Quran, to the Sunnah, it's all explained. And if something is difficult, ask the scholars. But it doesn't say follow by force what they say. And that's totally different from the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is total obedience to the murshid. It doesn't veer from that. If you veer 1 point or 2 points from the guidance of the murshid, you will be excommunicated.
Well, don't they say I'm a good Muslim?
They would say infidels like myself.
Infidels, right?
Which is wrong. I'm a Muslim. Saad is a Muslim. Zahack is a Muslim. Areej is a Muslim. But they might end up calling us infidels, or their more extreme parts will be calling for our heads,
yes.
Which is the reality.
Yep.
So
it's very common. It's very common in India as well. You speak something.
Yeah, the Maududi.
Maududi. You speak something moderate, they call you Jewish agent. They call you something extreme. It's ridiculous.
I'm sorry to talk over you, Zach, but you remember the piece I wrote about Maududi, and you saw the reactions. A lot of those wonderful people were calling me a Jewish shell or an infidel or whatever. Also, part of the core things that the Muslim Brotherhood depends on is the Palestinian issue. That's why they will never want a peace in the Middle East, because it will always drive their resources in the Middle East. Their cause will dwindle, And God forbid, how can we see Jews as people? Yeah. So they will always, and you will notice it. They call themselves, I'll say it in Arabic then explain, محور المقاومة, the resistance axis. I don't think I saw anyone from Iran or from Hezbollah or anybody except Saudi Arabia and Egypt who was involved, also Syria, who was involved in a direct war with Israel. But now Egypt, under President Saad, did the right thing, and they had peace, and they had a normal relations with their neighbors.
True.
Now the UAE is taking the same route. So is Bahrain. So did Sudan. So are we supposed to keep fighting a fight where all the people in the past have already, those started the fight, are dead and buried? Are we supposed to take around 3 million people and just toss them out to sea? I don't think this is part of what Islam is preaching.
Exactly. And
I also wanted to
yeah.
mention something that Sharon was talking about is looking non-Muslim as aliens, or like treating them badly, or thinking of them like, if you're not a devout Muslim, you should hate them. I don't think my religion taught me that. I don't think that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our Prophet, taught us that. Whatever I learned from the Seerah and the life of the Prophet is to be able to live with everybody, accept the differences. Yes, we should be teaching them about religion, but we cannot enforce the ideology of Islam on everybody else. And this is what Brotherhood was doing all along, all these years. They were trying to impose their version of Islam on the youth, on the people, on the government. And if you really, and it's just in a talk, and their extreme views, I wouldn't say that, yes, they had the correct version of Quran and Sunnah. No, their extreme views that people should be living like that, or people should be following Sharia. And the thing is that later on, when you really look at what Morsi did, for instance, I'm going to give you examples here, that they come in the picture that we want the Sharia law, and this is what drives our youth, whether it's Indo-Pak, whether it's the Arab world, whether it's the Muslims living abroad, that really moves their emotions, is that they say that you are doing something horrible to the people, and Turkey as well, Turkish president, who want to bring back the Khilafah, the what do you call it, Majd al-Islam, whatever glory of Islam back. But in reality, these people, since they are very, their thinking is very surface, and they don't research, that these people really don't want that. And it is in their talks, in their actions, in everything. Give an example of Morsi when he was given the chance finally, and subhanallah, I sometimes think that there is a wisdom behind God giving these people power and making us go through all this chaos for us to learn. There's a lot of wisdom behind it. So when he finally was given the power, what did he do? Did he imply Sharia? Did he, and then when you look at his videos, and the host asked Morsi that, are you planning to imply Sharia? And he said, well, Egyptian law is good enough. I don't think that we need to implement Sharia. So what I want to tell our listeners, that please do research and do go back to the original scholars and what they're saying. And I know there is a lot of problems, especially with non-Arabic speakers, and also the fact is that non-Arabs are a lot more than Arabs, and this is our job to translate those things. By the way, I'm a non-Arab too, who learned Arabic and learn all these things. So this is our job to break this wall, and that these terrorist organization, extremist organization, fundamentalists have put between the public and the true knowledge of, whether it's political knowledge, religious knowledge, And more these discussions should take place, and more these people should come out and talk about these things, because what I see that our young people and even older generation who is talking to the younger people have twisted mentality and twisted ideas, and they are really we are destroying ourselves if we, because the media out there is a lot more powerful than little groups like us, little people, individuals. Right now we are individuals. We need to put the effort together and stop this hatred that is spread all around the world. Yes, not all non-Muslim Americans. I have had great experience with non-Muslims or like that, and they're willing to help. But you also have to, come down to their level and talk. We can all, and in the end, what I understand from my religion is God wants and Rasul wants is peace, and stop this bloodshed, stop fights. One other thing that I learned through all these Arab Springs, that unless and until there's bloodshed, you cannot convince the population, the commoners, that they are the right people. And this is the kind of path they chose for themselves.
Khaled, yeah, please.
I would just like to add 2 points, and thank you to Dr. Areej for her points. One of the things you need to understand is the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists in general, they adapt a very layered approach to their dialogue. So when they are talking to liberal people, they are appealing to their mindset. When they're appealing to conservatives, they are appealing to that mindset. So it's a spectrum of dialogue. It's not just extreme right and extreme left. One of the things that I've been doing is I've been engaging with a lot of people who is right-wing. And you can see Zahack and Sharon also might know this. A lot of my audience on Twitter are right-leaning Europeans and Americans. How did that happen? I did not just dismiss their offenses or foul language that was in the beginning of the conversation. In fact, it was a very difficult one. Yeah, Sharon, you're laughing because you know. So it was a very difficult one.
Well, you would both, especially, I would get verses from the Quran, right? They would say, this is Islam, right? And they would send me like this. And I'd be like, all right, where is this in the Quran? And give me the full verse. So now I have to come back and say, okay, you're taking bits out. And it's no different if you go to the Old Testament, and you can find very ugly verses within the Holy Bible that look just as nasty. So exactly. It took me a while, and I went through, not just you, but I went through a few of you to figure out, all right, where is this coming from? What does it mean? What's the full information? So, and it's no different than anyone else. When you're diving into any of this, it's the same thing. So once you finally get past you are bad, and you're like, listen, this is what it means, and that's the point. And the more dialogue you have, the more they start to realize, oh, you're a really decent guy, and the more, I guess you could say, you become more humanized, where the media has really projected people from Saudi Arabia and Saudis as being like dehumanizing. That's really what the media has done. You have to admit, has done a lot of.
Wahhabis.
And our exposure, and I'm sure you guys have seen it too, what they have done to a lot of Americans, we're scared to death of people from the Middle East. Like, if all we did was watch the media, I don't know about it, we're scared to death. So, like, a lot of it, and I blame the media on their problems that they have created because of the way they project everything in the Middle East, where if all we are seeing is nothing but the Islamists and this problem, that problem, has caused a lot of the problems that you see with especially Americans, right? Now, Europeans, I think, have a lot more exposure because you guys constantly, it's a 4-hour plane ride. We're unfortunately, 15.
But the Al Jazeera was doing also the same thing and trying to paint
Right.
everyone in the middle or in the center, whether in Europe or the United States, as hicks, racists, and awful people. Just people, with their shotguns ready to shoot every Muslim
Exactly.
and everyone who's not just like them, which is unfortunately not the truth.
Right. Right. And
So
like
that's what I meant. It is a spectrum of dialogue that they're using because they need in human nature, when you give people a common enemy, they will line up behind that leadership. And that's what they're doing. And I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time, but I just need to get this point through. So what they are trying to do for some time with religious people in the Middle East, they were trying to paint it as a holy war. And it's the Ummah versus the Crusades or
Crusaders.
whatever they want to exactly. So they use those labels. But those people who's pushing those ideas, they're pushing it from, their members. The ones who's carrying forward the action is more than 200 to 300 organizations, and they're all offshoots of the Muslim Brotherhood. Funny thing is, those organizations will work so hard until they burn all these bridges, then they rebrand those same organizations. For example, Al Qaeda, ISIS, now Syrian fighters. So it is one and the same in one way or another, because Al Qaeda, in essence, is the byproduct of the teachings of Zarqawi, who was a member of Takfir and Al Hijrah. So it all leads to square one. You had the Qutbis, the students of Sayyid Qutb, yeah, exactly, who literally said the road to heaven is riddled with dismembered bodies and blood. And I think that's a very gruesome thing to say. And we still want to think this is a faith? No, it's not. It's a cult.
it's a cult.
It's a cult.
It is the cult.
Cult.
Meanwhile, in Muslim teachings, and I think Brother Saad would have more knowledge in that, in Muslim wars, except the Ottoman ones, because unfortunately they are counted as Muslims, you would find they will go, they will fight, but they will not commit, what is classified nowadays as war crimes. Meanwhile, if you look at what the Ottomans were doing, and this is where a lot of Christians adapted the perspective that all Muslim wars were the same as the Ottoman wars. Let's be honest, the Ottoman wars were gruesome, whether it was coming to Muslim countries or to Christian countries, because they adapted a lot of horrible and very horrific tactics of war, which they were using from their Mongol or Tatar ancestors that they have adapted even earlier in their wars on China, Vietnam, Korea, or Japan. So if you look at that history, those people in Europe at the time of Renaissance were fighting against Ottomans. Am I correct? So at that time, Europeans started writing down their history and how they were dealing with those, invaders. So that became the concrete history, the part of it. Meanwhile, even during times pre-Renaissance and post-Renaissance, between interactions between Muslims and Christians, even during the times of Crusades and all the things that happened, they were still having a kind of, interactions between two cultures. What the Muslim Brotherhood is preaching is not a culture, it's not a civilization, it's just a cultivation of power through any means necessary. And do understand, by any means necessary.
Khaled, I would like to ask you something. You mentioned in your discussion that the Muslim Brotherhood, they acquired the media and they misused the media. And this question is often asked to me, that what Saudi Arabia is doing to counter this media. And a lot of people have this thing that, Saudi Arabia should also have such media to, counterattack their propaganda. So what do you have to say about it?
I understand a lot of people are always asking, why shouldn't Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Egypt adapt the same methods or form of dialogue? Look, if you are fighting against someone who's, like, for example, fighting a dirty war, would you adapt his ways? You will be the villain, end of the day. I'm not saying our media is doing enough, far from it, but I am very hopeful that now with all the new initiatives and the awareness the young people have, we can do a lot of change. And with the exposure to the world that Saudis now have, we can correct something. And also, again, now I will divert one point to Brother Saad. A lot of people, especially in the US and Europe, are not in direct contact with Saudis. And they have a very negative perspective about Saudis, especially coming them from people who's mainly coming from the northern part of the Arab nations, i.e. Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon.
Yes.
Am I correct, Saad?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think part of that problem is, first of all, just because of what they hear from these quote unquote, these type of Ikhwani media outlets and stuff. They get fed all this stuff their whole life. And then they'll, one of my cousins, he was in Saudi Arabia one time, and some Saudi guy, he drove past the stop sign without stopping. So, all Saudis are bad now. So these,
and it's not just, and it's just not just the Brotherhood. It's, the whole idea of Pan-Arabism, that the social Arabism that was deeply rooted in these countries. Let's not forget that the Grand Mufti and the core of his power, who was fighting for the Nazis, were coming from those countries.
You're absolutely right, Khaled.
It is a deep-rooted racism issue.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're actually very right. I have a lot of exposure with the people from these countries as well, and you'll find that they're actually very, very secular and very, very strict upon their secularism, and they have a type of a proudness about their own, because let's just face it, there is some, even in terms of their ethnicity, they're a little bit different from the Arabs from the GCC countries, right? So they have a lot of issues with Saudis, not just Saudis, anybody from the Gulf countries, and they actually, they really hate them more than anybody else on earth. And if you ask any of them, hey, have you ever been to Saudi Arabia? Have you ever had a Saudi friend or anything like that? They'll be like, no, I haven't, but I heard everything that I need to know about them. And it's actually those people though, Khaled, to be honest with you, in my experience, they have although they claim to be Muslim, they have problems with the Islamic faith in and of itself. And I'm sure you're white, well versed with that, but that's also, I think, one of the issues with the pan-Arab movements. Yeah.
It's not just a problem of faith, it's a problem of ideology. Because, again, I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, and that's something intrigued Zahack a lot, when I talked about the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
Yes.
And when I mentioned, and I would like Zahack to chime in, when I mentioned he took the Muslim Brotherhood to a whole different level. Yeah. Look, Hassan al-Banna was not a very smart guy. He is smart, but not as smart as the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He could have sustained the Muslim Brotherhood on an Egypt level. But the Grand Mufti was always playing a double game with the Pan-Arabs, who were, the people, the remnants of the Ottoman Empire, They were like, like the lords in Europe, who they still had influence, power, and small forces. So he needed them. And he banked on the Muslim Brotherhood because he knows, and eventually that's the goal, that they will end up uh, seeking the revival of the Ottoman Empire. What is the benefit of someone who's an Arab and a Muslim like Al-Husseini to revive the Muslim Brotherhood? Of course, it's the wealth, and it's always about the money, because his ancestors were a long line of Ottoman employees and very well respected in the Ottoman circles. His uncle was one of the members of the governing people in the Ottoman Empire, and he was the governor of Iraq, Asir in Saudi Arabia before we pushed them out, and he also took part in the campaigns against the second Saudi state. A lot of people don't know that, and unfortunately, this is the part about education, because the education part always tries to, wipe the slate clean, and that relates to the part from the North Arabs and the Maududis, because they say, let's wipe the slate clean. The Ottomans were Muslim and we were Muslim, and there is no need for us to delve into those small incidents. And we're talking about genocide, by the way, but they see it as small differences and incidents.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Khaled. You nailed the hammer right there.
Yeah,
ahead,
I think Dr. Areej, she's been quiet and listening to all of us. I think she should be given a chance. I would like to ask Dr. Areej that you've been a good mother and a teacher, and you've got kids. So as a mother and as a teacher, how would you, protect your kids against this dangerous ideology? I mean, as a parent, how would you, act? Like you try to teach your kids to be away from the drugs and to be away from the bad company. In the same way, what are the tips or the things you do to protect your kids from the dangerous ideologies?
Actually, I have dealt with a lot of youth through my interaction on social media, and I think they are easily carried away. You can easily brainwash them. And the way these, organizations, and I would say organizations because Brotherhood is just a name, and it's the umbrella organization to a lot of extreme organizations like Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and so on and so forth. And a lot of young people are easily affected by their ideology, especially when they misuse Quran and Sunnah. And they would come to me and ask me, like, for instance, topic of nationalism. Like, there is no nationalism. If you're nationalistic and if you love your country, then you're not a good Muslim. You're not a Muslim. You're not Muslim enough. And I would ask them that, okay, let's see that, like, if you're living in Pakistan and another country attacks Pakistan and it's a Muslim country, because you don't believe in nationalism. So would you allow, because you don't believe in your own country, you are not loyal to your own country, so would you allow them to take over? And they will say, absolutely not. So then why do you allow countries like Turkey, countries like Qatar, countries like Iran, well, Iran everybody agrees on, to take over countries like Syria and Libya? Why is it? Oh, the answer is that, because they want to bring back the Khilafah, so it's justified. Exactly. So you have to be very careful. First of all, you have to be very patient, because we all lose patience. We don't have time. We are all very, very busy. So you have to be very patient in the way you explain to them. You can use sometimes the text from Quran, text from Hadith, and sometimes you can give them the real examples of, if, for instance, you don't love your country, what Turkey did to, for instance, Libya, and brought Syrians to fight them. So Syrians, why are they doing this? Because they're poor, because they don't have money, because they want to survive. So they are forced to do that. So Libya should give in, and let Syrians take over, let other countries take over? Absolutely not. So you have to have the love of yourself and your country first. But then the question they would ask, so what about brotherhood? And brotherhood, this term is literally abused by Erdogan all the time. إنما المؤمنون الإخوة إنما المسلمون الإخوة. Okay, so we are all brothers. What about Saudi Arabia that you bash day and night? What about Emirates? What about Egypt? What about Sisi? They are not Muslims? They are not your brothers?
Not Muslim enough.
Not Muslim enough, exactly. So like you, and I have a lot of hope in our youth and young people, because the major problem is that nobody is there to speak to them. Nobody is there to approach them. And with this kind of talk and taking your time and letting them know that we are with them, we understand their frustration, but leaving them alone and on the society and on even with my own kids, you know, I sit with them, I give them enough time with the whole situation with Trump and Biden, and everybody, literally everyone loves Biden. Why? Because the way the media has been portraying Biden. And what about how Trump is gonna, what Trump said and what he did? I said, what did he do? Give me an example. And they don't have any example. This is the only president that hasn't bombed the country. For the last 2 decades, I have seen bloodshed, bombing and killing and all that. So this is why I'm saying that we have to be very wise with the young people. And to save them is very hard because they're heavily influenced by their colleagues and by their peers and by the media. And you are just alone to explain to them these kind of things.
I would like to build upon a point Dr. Areej said. If you go to the numbers, during the time where Obama was president, the number of terror attacks in the Middle East surged almost 400%. Compare that to the time that Trump took over. One of the first things Trump did, he visited Saudi Arabia. He met with Saudi and Muslim leaders, and they came with a roadmap to squeeze, to a very big degree, which is not enough, but it's a good start, to squeeze on the funding of terrorism. The results of that is, number one, maximum pressure on Iran. Number two, the boycott of Qatar, and that helped a lot. Thanks to that, we have no more incidents, luckily, in the GCC. Third thing, you will notice the gradual decline and eventual fall of ISIS.
Right. That's right.
You'll see this gradual decline in attacks. So like you had a significant rise during Obama's term, right? We all saw
400%.
Exactly. And then when Trump got office, you would see a decline going down. And I will say this. I was a former Democrat, voted for Obama. We didn't, I think a lot of us were memorized by the way he spoke. We didn't realize what was really going on. And I think the majority of the majority of Americans have no clue about foreign policy, right?
True.
We are not really educated in our foreign policy, nor do we understand the impact of our foreign policy and the importance of what we do and who we elect and how that affects not just the Middle East, but Africa and even in Europe and all of the aspects of what that does. So that is what I've seen. And I guess my exposure to everything, it really opened up my eyes as to what really happened during all of not just the last 8 years with Obama and then during Trump's term, but also beforehand. Like you never really understood when you change hands between Republican and then Democrat, and then go back to Republican and then go back to Democrat, how that affects our foreign policy, and how you go from being, you know, Saudi, then back to Iran, then Saudi, then back to Iran, and how that impacts what's going on. And then, you know, one thing it should not change, and I'm sorry to say this, is our foreign policy when we change parties, but yet it does. And it has this huge impact. And we just don't know this. So that's our biggest problem that I have noticed, especially here in America. We don't know this. So.
Okay. I think we need to conclude the session, and I would like to request all of you, if you have any concluding points, you may go ahead.
I would start by saying, if you want to really defeat the Muslim Brotherhood, regulate the funding, regulate the imams. Foreign and Western government should work with the OIC in regulating the imams and controlling their, you know, mosques. The charities should all be, you know, we cannot just have Muslim charities and other charities. Why don't we just have charities like we do in Saudi Arabia? We just have charities for everyone. That's, you know, governed and controlled by the government that goes into their books. Remember, we used to have at one time Al-Haramain, I think it was called. It was involved in some shady, you know, funding because it had a lot of Muslim Brotherhood members, and it got cleaned out. We cannot allow it to, you know, continue like this. And Western governments should stop the flow of international and the foreigner funds that come into those countries, especially from the small state of Qatar, which is the biggest funder or the ATM of the terrorists nowadays.
Thank you so much, Khaled. I think we need to wind this up, and we didn't notice the time. We say that we will, you know, complete it within 1 hour, but alhamdulillah, we are reaching about 2 hours. That's really good, because the the discussion we had, that was really wonderful. You were sharing experiences, and we learned a lot. And I hope that even the audience who are watching this have learned a lot. And this session was truly insightful and, you know, wonderful. And I believe that everyone enjoyed it. And I really want to thank Khaled and Sharon and Saad and Dr. Areej for taking out time and, sharing the experiences and talking about the real stuff. And I wish that these kind of discussions should happen in future as well, so that, you know, we can educate and we can talk about the real issues, and we can connect people who are not connected with the real thing, real knowledge. We can connect them to the real knowledge and facts. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the audience. And if you really like this video, please share it with your friends. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.